And joining us now is Desmond Cole. He is the coordinator for I Vote Toronto. Welcome to TVO.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you about I Vote in a second, but first a little background on you. You didn't exactly star in American Idol, but you did something similar to American Idol. It was called City Idol.
That's right.
What was that all about?
City Idol was a competition in 2006 in the spring and summer, trying to get some new people involved in local politics in the city of Toronto. So there was a big contest, 100 people in the first round, and you had 1 minute to say what you liked about the city and what you'd do to improve it. The next couple of rounds were more challenging. Thousands of people came out to watch this. It was a wonderful event. I was one of the regional winners, and
for that, you had the pleasure of running against Adam Vaughan and losing.
That's
actually
what
ran
happened.
for office.
I actually ran for office. That was part of the competition, and the people who volunteered and helped out with City Idol then came and volunteered and helped me out with my campaign, and it was a wonderful experience, really.
Great. Okay, let's get into I Vote Toronto now. Start by telling everybody what that is.
I Vote Toronto is a campaign to extend the municipal vote to permanent residents, or sometimes called landed immigrants, used to be called, in the province of Ontario. We have 67 coalition members right now, different community organizations, be they immigrant serving organizations or social justice organizations, environmental groups, community centers, and we all believe that the hundreds of thousands of people, not just in Toronto, but across the province, need to have a local stake in their communities for the issues that affect them every day, like public transit, childcare, their parks, their local schools, things that are really immediate things in their lives, and we want them to be able to have a say. And so we're calling on the provincial government to consider making this legislative change.
That sounds fine on the surface. However, what you're proposing is to give non-citizens the vote, which is fairly controversial. Why do you think this is a good idea?
We think it's a good idea because while some might think that it's controversial, we've got to look at what is at stake here. What's at stake in the city of Toronto is hundreds of thousands of people who are new to the city, 50,000 or so about every year. We're trying to build a city that is equitable, a city that's prosperous, and we have a lot of new people in our city all the time. So the question is it to our benefit to continue to exclude so many people from the municipal process? So that's one reason why we think it's a good idea. It's also a good idea to tell people that they belong in a community and that they have a responsibility and a stake in what goes on, and that they're not just residents, that they actually have to participate in city building, they have to participate in being part of a community, and this is one way to say that.
Okay, up until now, of course, citizenship has been the relatively high bar that you have to jump over in order to be able to vote at election time. Would there be any kind of minimal requirements that you would have to have if you're not a citizen and yet you want to have the right to vote?
Well, first of all, we have to remember the history of voting in the province of Ontario, actually, because non-citizens have been allowed to vote in the province of Ontario and across Canada.
Actually, if you're a British subject, you could vote.
That's correct.
That's right.
And that was the case up until the late 1980s, or 2003, actually, in the case of Nova Scotia, were permanent residents, or sorry, British subjects who are not citizens allowed to vote.
Okay, but we changed that.
We changed that, but there was a logic behind it, which was that if people live in a place, if people own property in a place and they have a stake, we want them to have a say. And so it's not really much different of an argument now. We're saying the exact same thing. It just happens to not just be British subjects, but all people who have gone through the process of becoming a permanent resident, which is a process that begins well before they ever come to Canada.
So if you were a permanent resident, you would have to have lived here for how long before you could vote in an election?
Some permanent residents have that status upon arrival, but as I say, it's a process of a couple of years before they even have to get here. Others, there are a couple of different ways to become a permanent resident.
Okay, but you see what I'm getting at here. I mean, this is the thing that's going to drive some people upset, because if you've literally just got off the plane from somewhere else in the world and you have your landed status 10 minutes later, and the election is tomorrow, and you're allowed to vote in that election tomorrow, is that right?
Some places that allow non-citizens to vote, and there are many, many dozens around the world, have a residency requirement. You have to live there for 6 months, you have to live there for a year.
You want that to be a feature of what you're suggesting?
I think it's something that the government absolutely can consider. We're not trying to suggest one way or the other, but if people think that there needs to be a mandatory requirement of how long you live somewhere, I don't think that that's unreasonable at all. But I would remind everybody also that, I was born in Alberta. So when my parents moved to this part of the country, they didn't know the neighborhood, they didn't know the local politicians, they didn't know the local issues.
But they were citizens and could vote.
They were citizens of the country, but what I'm trying to say is that the context in which we want people to understand their voting, where they live, what the issues are, who their neighbor is, who the community is, those don't really have a lot to do with citizenship so much as where you live.
Okay, just to be clear, you're not suggesting this for provincial or federal elections, you're only suggesting for municipal elections?
That's correct.
How come?
Because local politics, I should say, is really the closest to people's lives. And the issues that we're talking about, so let me give you an example. I work in Thorncliffe Park, Thorncliffe Neighborhood Office. That's a neighborhood with newcomers from places like India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, Central Africa, really all over the world. We have the largest middle school in North America in our neighborhood. That means that thousands of parents who are sending their children to these schools can't even vote for the local trustee, even though they have a stake in their children's education, and they're paying taxes through their property tax or through renting.
They can't vote for that trustee, but they can certainly call that trustee, pester that trustee, pressure that trustee, or the local politician on city council for that matter, to do their bidding, right? So it's not to say that they're completely disenfranchised from participating in politics in the city. That's fair to say.
And that's not the argument that we're making at all. What we're saying is that the city would be a lot better if people were enfranchised with this form of participation. There was a time in Ontario when you actually couldn't be a member of, you couldn't practice law unless you were a citizen. But we changed that because we said citizenship doesn't really have anything to do with your ability to contribute in that way. In the city of Toronto, you used to not be able to serve on an agency, board, or commission of the city. So let's take an American citizen who moves here. They could have worked in all of the fancy and well-known libraries in the university circuit in the United States, and now they come to Toronto, they want to volunteer on the library board, and they say, well, you're not a citizen, so you can't. Over time, we started looking at things like this and saying, yeah, the citizenship requirement was there, but is it helping? Is it contributing? Is it making people the best in their communities that they can be? So that's what we're asking in this case.
Here's the bigger question. Already, more than 60% of the people who are eligible to vote in municipal elections don't. So let's say you get the vote for this group of people that currently doesn't have it. What makes you think they're going to be any more interested in using it than the people who've lived here for longer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the 67 organizations that have signed on to a campaign so far, not all of them work exclusively with immigrants. Most of these organizations are working on a broader civic engagement mandate all the time. We're trying to get everybody involved in voting, everybody involved in civic education and knowing what's happening in their communities. So we have a responsibility as people who have signed on to this campaign to try and make sure that we continue to do the things that we're already doing. We have all kinds of things like language instruction classes that tell people all kinds of things about their country and our traditions, our holidays. We have social groups. We have all kinds of things in our communities and these organizations are doing to try and make sure that people have a sense of what's going on around them. We organize all candidates debates during the election period. We're going to continue doing that work. So we see this as kind of a part of what we're doing and trying to make sure everyone, not just people who are new to Canada, are going to get involved in their community.
Okay, when you put forward this idea, and you have been championing it now, I guess a few months ago the Toronto Star offered up its op-ed pages to those who wanted to press the case both for and against this. And here's what Gordon Chong, who's a former Toronto City Councillor, and Marianne Chambers, who's a former Ontario Cabinet Minister, had to say about that. The I vote proposal, they wrote, might seem reasonable because it attempts to fulfill the dual objectives of inclusivity and catalyzing newcomer integration. However, they write, it has the potential to undermine the value of Canadian citizenship. Newcomer integration can be accomplished in an incremental fashion without compromising one of the most sought-after privileges in this country, the right to vote upon attaining citizenship. Here's the question. What does granting the right to vote to non-citizens accomplish that can't wait the 3 years required for them to become actual citizens of the country?
What it does is it gives people a signal when they are part of a neighborhood that that's when we want them to contribute, that's when we want them to be part of the conversation of building a better community. As to the point about devaluing citizenship, just because we want to extend the local vote, the municipal vote, we're not going to take away any of the other rights that are already included with being a citizen, namely being able to vote in a provincial or federal election, being able to hold a passport and all the mobility rights that come with that, certain access to public sector jobs that are favored if you are a citizen or not. Those things are all going to remain in place. So I think that it's important to remember that those are very, very important and lucrative things that people want when they come to this country. And to suggest that they're not going to want those things anymore just because they have the right to vote in their local neighborhood, I don't think is fair.
You don't think it cheapens citizenship at all?
No, cheapens absolutely not. You know, the best way to get involved is to actually do something. One of the organizations that we are partnering with on this campaign is Student Vote. Student Vote goes into schools with kids who can't vote yet, and they do mock elections because their idea is the best way to learn how to be part of the system is actually to participate in doing. It's not necessarily to be removed from the process back watching. So we want people to actually get involved, and that first time that somebody has to go and vote, that's the time that they're the most excited. That's the time that they want to go out and learn the most about their community, learn the most about the issues, so that they can feel like when they go and vote, if that's what they want to do, they're really out there and making an informed choice. And we think that the best way to encourage that is to actually get people to go and do it.
Okay, do you have any evidence that the groups that you're purporting to represent here actually want this?
Yes, absolutely. And many of the thousands and thousands of people who have interacted with this campaign for the year and a half that I've been working on it are in fact permanent residents. And you know, a lot of them are doing really unbelievable things in their communities, and they're going to continue doing that whether they have the right to vote or not. But absolutely, and it's not just in Toronto. I would offer that we've been in contact with people from places like Montreal, Vancouver. We even got a call from a small town in Saskatchewan because they were having municipal elections back in October, and they said, we want to advocate on this issue. The mayor is for it. A lot of the people in the city are for it. We have a large immigrant community. And that's the kind of thing that really makes me encouraged, because this is not just a Toronto issue or, for that matter, an Ontario issue. It's happening all over the world in jurisdictions in pretty much every continent. And I think it's really time that we consider this, given how many people are immigrating here and how much we want them to succeed.
Does the incentive to apply for citizenship get reduced if you have the vote before you're a citizen?
Again, no. You don't have all the rights associated with citizenship. You have the right to vote for your city councillor, your mayor, and your school board trustee. You know, I know how proud people are when they become Canadian citizens, and I've been to many citizenship ceremonies now, and people really want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like they have what everyone else has in a society, and there's no way that they're going to give that up. People aren't going to hear, hey, you know, Canada has municipal voting now in Ontario, so we can go there and we don't even have to become citizens. No way. It's just too much of an advantage to go through the process to become a fully fledged citizen. And we really believe that encouraging the campaign that we are is going to include even more people in that process, even though we're doing a great job in Canada. About 85% of permanent residents become naturalized citizens, and that's astronomically higher than most other countries.
I wonder what percentage of them, once they become citizens, vote. I wonder if they, you know, they become as apathetic as everybody else once they actually become citizens.
It's a great question. Meyer Simiatiki of Ryerson University is one of the people who's done, you know, a lot of research around this issue. There's not a whole lot of research and work going on, excuse me, and I think that that's really what's concerning us, is that whether we're talking about citizens or not citizens, voter turnout is decreasing, and confidence in our public institutions and our public officials is decreasing. We have to do something about that, and part of the solution, we feel, is including the newest people into the community right away and not allowing them to languish for 3 or 4 years or however long, because in many cases it's longer, to become a citizen before they really feel like they have a stake. If they've had to wait several years, maybe they don't pay attention, maybe they think it's not worth it at that point.
I know the current mayor of Toronto, David Miller, is a supporter of this idea, but by this time next year, he's not going to be there anymore. He's not running again. Do you have any other people at City Hall who are championing this?
Many. There are many city councilors who are going to be also up for re-election in the fall who think that this is a great idea. We've talked with pretty much every party at the province, because this is, of course, a provincial matter and the province has to make the decision on it. We're speaking with everybody, but what I'm most encouraged by in Toronto is the people and the organizations who represent those people who are coming forward and saying that this is a great idea. But this is not just something that we want to see happening in Toronto. In order to really move this forward, we have municipal elections coming up this year, it's the people who need to tell their politicians that this is an issue that matters, and they'd have to do it in Markham and Brampton and Oshawa and Windsor just as much as they need to do it in Toronto. So that's a very big priority for us.
Okay, but this is what you're, technically speaking, what you're looking for is a change to the Municipal Elections Act, which is a provincial law.
That's right.
So basically, you need the McGuinty government to change the law to enable this to go ahead.
That's right.
A, have you lobbied them yet?
We're talking to them all the time.
And B, what's their reaction so far?
Their reaction so far is, I think, to say that you need to keep the conversation going and you need to show us how many people in your constituencies actually really want this. And I think that that's a very fair position for them to take.
They haven't shut you down yet.
Absolutely not.
But they're not bubbling with enthusiasm, I think it's fair to say also, isn't it?
I'll let them speak for themselves. But no, I think that it depends who you ask, and I think that it depends what the makeup of their community is, because most certainly in communities where there's a very high newcomer population, people are much more interested or in tune with this issue. But you know, whether you have a community that has hundreds of thousands or even just a few, the idea of feeling like you belong is universal. So I don't think it has to necessarily be something that only matters in the communities where there are high newcomer populations.
If, obviously you're here in Toronto, you think this is a good idea for Toronto, but ideally would you like to see this happen in every municipality across Ontario?
I actually don't see any other way for it to happen. I think that if the province deems that this is a good idea in one municipality, they have to agree that it's a good idea for all of them.
But if they're not clamoring for it elsewhere, but they are here, could they do something just for the city?
Well, I doubt it, to be quite honest with you. I think that it might be possible, and some people talk about, you know, possibilities within the City of Toronto Act. We're not looking for a win just for Toronto here. We're looking for some, I mean, look at a place like Mississauga that's right next door. This is, if you just want to talk about numbers and demographics, it's as much an issue in Mississauga as it is for
Sure, but I'm not thinking Mississauga. I'm thinking Sault Ste. Marie or Thunder Bay or Sudbury or North Bay. I mean, if you're going to do it here, do you have to do it up there as well?
Yeah, because if you have somebody who moves here from another country with their family to be a doctor, for example, in a remote community, or chooses to open a business in a small town, now they've made an investment in that community and they have a stake in that community. It doesn't change it whether there are one of them or 100,000.
Okay. Desmond, in our last minute here, we have a municipal election coming up in October, right, of this year. This is not going to be in place for October of this year, is it?
No, but this is a great opportunity for us, as I was saying before, to talk to all of the candidates who are coming into the municipal elections all over the province and saying, you know, this is something that you really need to look at.
So would you anticipate this being in place for the next municipal elections 4 years hence?
I certainly hope so, and I think that this is the time for us to do it. We've built a whole lot of momentum. Our network is growing, our endorsements are growing. A whole lot more people know about this campaign now than when I first started a year and a half ago. And we have to keep the momentum going. I think it's incredibly doable for the next time around. We won't have it for 2010, but for 2014, absolutely. And we'll be out there working the hardest to make sure that the people that we fought for, who we're trying to get this right for, and who are fighting on behalf of themselves also, have all of the educational opportunities that they need to participate, and that, like I said before, we can get candidates coming and visiting us in our community centers, and we can get all the things that people need to feel like, you know what, I do know how to do this, I'm ready, and it's my time to go and vote.
That's Desmond Cole, coordinator of I Vote Toronto. Good of you to visit us at
Thank
TVO
you.
tonight.
Thank you very much.